Good afternoon. I'm Anders Mikkelsen, and apologize for being a couple minutes late. I am still trying to figure out how to get the presentation working. So we will see how that goes. For some reason, it's being a little slow. Let me see if I can add an additional window here for the PowerPoint slide. And hopefully that's entered. Okay. Okay, I wanted something a little bit bigger. Let's see. Minimize this. Okay. Okay, well, I think we'll go with this format. So my apologies for being a little bit late, and let me add one more thing here. Okay, well, good morning. I'm Anders Mikkelsen with Berlin Pacific, and today I'm going to talk about validation of WAN, internet, voice, and telecom bills. It's basically a how-to. We're going to try to do a quick how-to, share some of my years of experience here. We give people a little bit of time to join, and it's about 4 minutes after the hour. Maybe give it another minute. Hope everyone is doing well, having a good day. And yeah, so I wanted to talk about this just to do like a kind of a how to give you a sense of, my experience. This is something which I think will help a lot of people if you're in a position of facing, looking at big bills. That's part of your responsibility. It could be in the finance department, IT department. You have some sort of oversight, or maybe even as part of your cost center, and you're looking at a whole bunch of expenses from a company like AT&T or Ring Central or Verizon or T-Mobile. What are some of the things that you should look at? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing is, we're here to talk about what to watch out for before you pay that big bill from Verizon and AT&T and Lumen, et cetera. Questions like, can I defend paying this bill? Am I giving away my money? Should I investigate this bill further? And we're going to go in and we're going to see some examples of bills and what we're talking about. And so to save you all time, I'm going to talk about when I get a big WAN, internet, voice, or mobile bill, would I pay it or would I investigate it? And so I'm going to give you some insight into my thinking. And so why should you listen to me? Well, over 100 firms like Walmart, Citibank, RSM McLadry, O'Neill Steele Sonder, and the makers of Zelle, early warning systems, they've asked me to help them recover costs on their WAN, internet, and voice bills. And typical results, 20 to 50% of annual spend recovered, 100K to 500K per engagement, sometimes a lot more than that. Savings on invoices within 60 days. So, a fair amount of experience looking at different bills from all the big vendors and a lot of small vendors you probably never heard of, as well as working with a whole bunch of different companies of all different sizes. And I also wrote a book that companies use as a training manual. It's called Principles of Telecom Expense Management. It's on Amazon. If you'd like a review copy, feel free to reach out to me. And the principles apply to telecom, but they also apply to IT vendor services spending in general. So if you read that, you would see a lot of insights around SaaS spend, cloud spend. And I would say you could even say just vendor services in general. There's some ways you can apply what we talk about that. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me and love to talk more about it. So one of the concepts today is reviewed is not necessarily validated. So reviewed, what every team does which I've seen, is, they check the bills against the previous month and totals are approved in the budget process and contracts are referenced on renewal. And so there's usually and take a look at it. So what we're going to discuss today is, when you look at the bill and you print it out, or you got to print out, or you look at the PDF, which is typically what people do, or maybe you go on a portal, maybe you don't even look at the PDF anymore. I think you should always look at the PDF, but is the vendor leaving out key data that makes parts of the bill impossible to verify? That's really what we're talking about today. If the CEO asks you to explain any line item, could you? And should this be investigated further? So kind of bill validation workflow we're talking about here is it's a practical process to determine, should I pay this big bill or should I investigate it? And I think that's really the big question. You get so here's the process, right? You get a big invoice from AT&T, Verizon, Lumen, et cetera. And, so your team does the usual check. And then in this case, we're going to add a little step of, here's some questions you can apply from the class. Is data missing? Could you defend this bill? Does it warrant a closer look? And so we'll kind of have some checklist items, and feel free to write me if you want a copy of something. And so then you can make a decision. Should I pay it or should I flag it for deeper investigation? And so this can give you some ideas of, more likely to be able to pay with confidence and investigate what warrants it. And so if there's a deep dive, you can bring in a specialist like myself at Berlin Pacific, and we can do the full analysis. And, we spend many hundreds of hours on the initial stages helping our clients. But we go in and go through every single charge on a bunch of different bills from all the big vendors. So that's our deep dive. We're not going to talk about that process today, but the book explains exactly how to do it. And, you can definitely reach out to me, or I have videos on YouTube and probably articles on LinkedIn, which explain our process as well. So here's an example of a real bill. And so you hopefully can see the one in the middle, and you can see that there are the total charges. It's like over $5,000 a month. So that adds up over a year. So what do we see here? We see the monthly service from is $4,120. And so, okay, so that's what you're paying for. Okay, that's interesting. So what are we paying for? Okay. Well, it does break it down further to $3,703 plus FCC charges. Okay, well, that's good. But what is that $3,703? Well, we kind of go through the bill and we don't see anything. Actually, we see that there are charges for local calls, and it really added up for sure. But there was no explanation of what that $3,703.18 was. Does not say anywhere in the bill. And so what happened is we had to go get the CSR from Verizon. And so what, right? Well, the bill's like $4,995, but when you looked at the cost of things plus all the taxes and surcharges, there are all these unnecessary charges. They were paying $21,000 on unused data line charges, which they didn't need anymore. They were spending $5,600 a year on POTS line charges they didn't need anymore. And we even got them a one-time credit of $24,000. And so I was sure happy. I looked into it, and I knew that it was a good idea to look into it because I could tell that nobody knew what this bill was for. There's no documentation. The bill itself didn't have any explanation for what it was for. So that's a good example. So I would say, so you see a bill like that, you definitely need to investigate it. Okay, so here's another totally different bill, totally different company. So what are some of the things I see? Well, one of the first big things I see is, well, there are 5 toll-free storage fees. Well, what are those? They're probably monthly recurring charges for toll-frees. But seriously, what are those? Why are there 5 of them? What are they for? If you look at number 7, you can see that there are 3 phone numbers listed, 3 800 numbers. But why are there 5 charges? And there's only 3 phone numbers with actual calls being made. What are those charges for? Where are they? What's the phone number associated with it? And if you go through this whole bill, it does not say anywhere. And there's actually hundreds of these charges, as it turns out. And as it turned out, only a very few of them, there were only very few toll-free numbers mentioned, which were actually making calls. So that was definitely an issue. On top of that, we had you can see other things like, well, why is the federal universal service fund charge so high at $94? Is that being calculated correctly? Could be, but how do you know that? We'd want to see some documentation explaining how they reached those numbers. It seems a little high. It seems like almost 50% of which seems high even for USF. So that'd be another question. How is this calculated? Then there's a USF related charge. Well, there's another $20. Well, how is that being calculated? Where does that come from? There's network recovery assessment. Well, how is that being calculated? Where does that come from? There's a property tax surcharge. Well, where does that come from? How is that calculated? There's also a $20 regulatory compliance fee. So there are all these charges just in one account. How do we know what any of these are for? Why are they there? That's what I would ask. And we did ask. And actually the client in this case, they knew that this bill didn't make a lot of sense either. So that's why they brought us in to help figure it out and get to the bottom of it. But they just didn't have time to spend, trying to figure out what was going on with the vendor and going back and forth with them and escalating until we got a good explanation. So then, we look at another sub account and we can see here, okay, well, there's 34 of these pre-sub carrier line charges. I think these are long distance PICs, like monthly recurring charges. And so then the question is, okay, well, what are these 34 numbers? Well, it's nowhere in the bill. And also, where are these numbers located? And that's nowhere in the bill either. So you have no idea what are these 34 numbers? Where are they? Are they being used or anything? And in fact, it turned out that when we looked through it, it seemed that there was, in fact, no evidence of any outbound calls justifying these 34 outbound call monthly recurring charges. So you can see that there is toll-free usage. So yeah, maybe that toll-free service fee makes sense, but there's also another question. Well, why is that one $15? We saw on another page that it was $9.95. Also, what is that toll-free number? What's going on there? But it looks like that one is in use, so that's good. But then there's also questions like, well, why is there a regulatory cost recovery fee? And that's the same thing about the Fed administration expense fee. Why is there an access recovery fee? These are all questions which aren't being explained in the bill. And, there's 34 charges for things and we have no idea what they are. And the bill doesn't tell you. So then we come to another one. Okay, well, here are some more toll-free storage fees. There's an account management system and billing fee. There's a regulatory compliance fee. This is a totally different account number. And we look and there's no explanation of what these fees are for. There's no evidence that any of them are making any calls or getting any calls. So why is this $41 a month being paid every single month? And it has been for years. So that's, almost $500 a year, just right there. And then to say $500 a year for over 10 years, that's like $5,000. So, why do we want to spend, $5,000 over the next, 10 years on this? Here's another one. There's an access recovery fee of $227. But if you look at all the individual charges, there's no obvious phone line or anything. It's not exactly what the service is being charged. So it looks like there's probably a pre-sub carrier line charge. So maybe you're being charged $36.42 for one outbound long distance monthly recurring charge. But what is that phone number? Where is it? It doesn't seem to be making any calls. Why are we paying $36.42 in this one sub account? Do the math again, over 12 months and 10 years. You're starting to spend, some money needlessly. And so what? So in this case, the bill was $3,500 a month. The unnecessary charges turned out to be at least $24,000 a year after taxes for toll free. And then the long distance MRCs after taxes and surcharges, that was throwing on like another $11,000 a year. So that, that was significant. So that's, I would say that's, this was definitely another bill. You look at that and you're like, investigate it. The client saw it and they knew for sure they wanted it investigated specifically. So they actually brought us in to look at that exact bill because they themselves realized that they could not make head or tail of what all these charges were for. They knew they needed to pay it because they wanted to have inbound toll-free calling. That was the way that their customers called in. So it was important to keep those lines up and running. At the time, maybe they'll change, they may change because people are starting to use them less. But it was a bill they needed to pay, but they didn't need to pay all of it turned out. So hopefully this is really helpful. And then we're going to go into another one. So this is a totally different vendor, totally different client. And so this might not be easy to see depending on how big your screen is. So we're looking at a DDoS mitigation service, and we can see that there's no usage data on this, and there's no link. If you look at the whole bill, there's no link to the underlying line. So it tells you, yeah, there's this DDoS service which exists, but it doesn't tell you, what it's for, what it's protecting, if it's even being used, if it, maybe no data is there. And in this particular case, we actually did discover multiple times that underlying circuits were being disconnected, as they should be, and retired. And yet Lumen was failing to notice the security overlay, this DDoS service. They were failing to track down the associated DDoS service and get it off the bill, even though it wasn't working, it wasn't protecting anything, it was completely purposeless. So this is the type of thing I would flag looking at this big Lumen bill. And then here's another one. And hopefully you can see this. So you can see how there is a VPN. In this case, it's a point-to-point. So it goes from, you see number 2 to 3, it goes from Ashburn, Virginia to Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a EVPL, so it's a point-to-point circuit. But what's interesting here is there's only one local loop in Ashburn, Virginia. So the question is, well, where's the other local loop? And with these types of services from Lumen, you have to pay for a circuit in one location, and then you pay for a circuit in another location, then you pay for the EVPL, linking them together, and that makes it a point-to-point circuit. In this case, well, where's the rest of it? And in this case, it turned out that, well, there was no rest of it, and that was because Lumen had been told to disconnect all the circuits in the Scottsdale headquarters because they were moving out of that Scottsdale headquarters and moving into a new building. And so Lumen went ahead and disconnected all the circuits, but Lumen failed to disconnect the other end of the point-to-points, and that includes the EVPL and the local loop at the other location. So just left everything hanging on the bill, totally useless, wasn't doing anything. Nobody noticed, it was just buried in these bills. So fortunately, we found it. But so this was definitely worth investigating. We had to ask more questions to the vendor, get them to explain, what was going on, and they confirmed that, oh yeah, that actually is a partial circuit. So they had to get it off the bill and provide a refund. Okay, yeah. So what? Well, one unnecessary charge is $43,000 a year. That adds up, and that's just one charge. There's potentially multiple charges in this bill, as we saw. And so did all of those examples, did they require further investigation? My answer is yes, they definitely did. Hopefully this gives you some insight into my thinking and what I would look for if I were you in your shoes and asking, like, is this good, or does this make sense or not, or should we have a kind of a deeper investigation into these big expenses? So here's some common missing data points on bills. What is the service? Are there identifiers like a circuit ID, a username associated with it, a phone number? Is there a location for this service? Is there any data about the usage? Do we know what the underlying service is, if it's reliant on being part of working with other services? Is that being identified in the bill? So these are commonly missing, not all the time, but they're enough of the time that they're missing that this makes the bill not defensible. And you don't really know if it's something you should be paying for 100% of, or if you should just be paying for part of the bill. So, and one thing to keep in mind is that always missing data points do include things like the contractual price, the market price, and do you need it? So in our opinion, there is a case to be made that every time you are spending a lot of money on big landline bills, you should be, and mobile bills, you should have a full-blown study done where we inventory every single charge and we confirm that, what the contractual price is, what the market price is, and do you need it? And have all three of those things confirmed. We definitely think that is a good idea. But when you're looking at a bill, just to say like, hey, is this bill defensible on the face of it, superficially? You can expect those data points to be missing. But you might also be able to know, like, okay, we kind of know our contractual prices, and we do think we know the market prices. In my opinion, it's good to have outside experts like myself review the market prices. And maybe your setup is simple enough that you're able to very clearly identify if you need it, because you do clearly see on the bill what the location is, what the circuit ID is, what the usage quantities are. So you can probably figure out if you need it. And this works if you have a limited number of bills and a limited number of locations. If my experience, if you find a lot of locations, then it's very hard to do this all in your head, and therefore you want to have a full-blown study, in my opinion. And okay, so the next one we're going to look at is, what are some other data points to look out for? So these are things which could be missing on your bill or be present on your bill. So is there some evidence when you look at the bill that this service, that there's zero usage on this service? Sometimes bills will tell you that. And so if you see zero usage, then that's a problem potentially. So you want to be able to say, oh, okay, there's zero usage. Do I know this is something I might use? Is this here for DR, or is there some good reason there's no usage? It might not be at your current facility if it shows the location. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. It could be that it's not for a current employee. One of our colleagues, they used our book to help their practice helping cities, and they helped a large city in this area. And they went through a wireless bill for part of the city government, and probably about, I don't know if it was 50% of 1,000 cell phones or 50% of 2,000 cell phones in the bill were not being used for a current employee, or just were not in use, and they could just get rid of those monthly charges. And then other data points, look for, is there no underlying service? Is the rate inconsistent? Is it, if you look at a bunch of 100 meg lines, does the rate change depending on where it is? And is there not a good reason for that? Like, let's say it's the port rate. Usually that's consistent. It's not location dependent. Also look out for, is it a partial or incomplete service? And then also look out for the taxes and surcharges calculations. Do you see taxes and surcharges calculations? Do they explain them? Is it clear how it all works? Does it seem like it really adds up to a high number? In my opinion, it always seems like it adds up to a high number, but it's still, there's extremes. And you'll get a feel for that looking at different things, but it's best for them just to show you the calculations, in my opinion. Okay, so in my opinion, most well-run IT teams have never had a reason to investigate bills further and validate bills end to end, and go from the sort of initial stage to requesting a deep dive review, have somebody like us go look at everything. The bills look fine. And so that's exactly why it never gets prioritized. But I found that every time I come into an organization, even if they're skeptical, even if they're doing a great job of managing their costs, we always find stuff, because it's so complex and the billing is so complex. And we almost always find something significant because nobody has prioritized doing the deep dive investigation. And when you look at the bills, just doing these kind of basic validation steps, which I talked about, I think you'll see, if you're an organization with hundreds of employees or more, I think you'll see, when you look at a lot of the big bills you get, you'll be like, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of these things, these red flags show up all the time. So hopefully that's helpful. And so we've developed an AI tool that can read your bills in minutes and not weeks, and it answers, should this be investigated? And it flags automatically charges that can't be confirmed active, rate inconsistencies, and missing data points. So bill copy is all we need. Reach out to run your bills through it. There's no commitment required. And so we'll post the link. It's berlinpacific.com/validation. So that's a link you can use, and you'll get your results emailed to you. And so here's just sample results. This is on one of the things we ran earlier. So the AI automatically goes through. It says, okay, you're being billed $3,500 a month. Okay, and says, well, okay, this is weird. You're being billed for 210 toll-free numbers in storage, but there's 0 telephone numbers on the bill. You have no idea what it's for. You don't know which one's for active use. Also, one's being charged for like $20 a number. And then another one says, well, there's 93 voice lines across 10 sub-accounts, but there's no call detail provided. And 14, and one sub-account have no phone number related to it, it's just account charges. And then the other 78 lines, there's maybe one phone number disclosed per sub-account, but you don't really know what the rest of the lines are for. There's another $41 a month, and have no idea what this is for. And then also the taxes and surcharges don't make any sense. So this is what the AI comes up with, saying like, yeah, there's thousands of dollars at risk here. We can't really explain what this is for. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Doesn't mean there's not an explanation for it. It's just you need to ask the vendor for an explanation. And that's something we can do. We'll go in and investigate all the details, and we'll verify that everything you're paying for is something you really need, and it's not an unnecessary charge. So what? Well, these were real findings, and in real life, we have recoverable savings of thousands of dollars a month, and that's going very successfully. And they're very happy that that we investigated that. And so here's another one. We ran through the AI. So $69,000 a month, and it identified a bunch of billing issue buckets across DDoS security, wavelength transport, EVPL, and wireless services, just like sort of fixed wireless data services. And so one big thing, no usage data was provided for any service on this invoice. Well, that should be a red flag, because how do you know if you're using it if there's no usage data? It's not great. And then another big thing was that the rates were varying materially for the same services for transport. And then also there were some access loop variations at the same location. So that's a little weird. Definitely worth investigating if there's rate inconsistencies. And then it also flagged, well, why are there so many DDoS services? What are they? How are they related to anything? That's just not clear. It doesn't mean it does not mean that they're not in use and not protecting something. It's just not clear on the bill. And so you really want to get that verified, because as we know, they're perfectly capable of charging you for something which isn't actually working and isn't actually doing anything, as well as charging you for services which are doing something. So they're going to charge you both ways. And then another big bucket, the EVPL circuits, 2 EVPL circuits were missing the foreign access loop. So the AI did detect that automatically going through the bill, that, there's some circuits here which don't really make a whole lot of sense. They don't seem logically coherent. They should have a far end access loop. Maybe it's out there, but it's not clear on the bill. So you got to ask Lumen. And in this case, it turned out that there weren't them. And then similarly to the taxes and surcharges aren't particularly clearly laid out. You don't really know where the numbers come from and if they're being calculated on an individual basis. So you'd have to ask for more data from Lumen. Okay. So what? Several of these charges were substantial and no longer tied to active services. And these are charges the client didn't have to pay and didn't know were recoverable. So that was a big benefit. And we're going to try to wrap up here. Hopefully I haven't spent too long. I'm definitely around if there's any Q&A. And so please message me if you want to run an AI validation against one of your bills, or if you want a complimentary consultation. So you can go to berlinpacific.com/validation to run the automated AI workflow. And you just pop in your bill, and put in your email address and phone number and name, and then you'll probably get something within the next 20 minutes. I've run a few tests. It seems to be working at the moment just fine. So that's great. And then, yeah, so please feel free to give that a shot and reach out to me if you want a complimentary consultation on any of this, or my advice on how I would view something you guys are paying or dealing with. And okay, so what we've covered today. Should you pay this? Just pay it straight up, or just go ahead and investigate it, ask someone to look into it in more detail. You can ask us, you can ask your vendor some questions. And we talked about why reviewed is not the same as validated. We talked about what vendors leave off bills that makes recoverable money invisible and what it costs. And we gave you that whole list of things to look out for. Feel free to DM me if you want that list. We talked about how our AI tools surfaces those findings automatically. Just send in a bill and you'll get back results within probably 20 minutes. So for full investigations, we found that for companies spending $500K a year on AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen, every month of inaction is approximately $8,000 to $21,000 left on the table. So we only get paid from savings we actually deliver. If we find nothing, you owe nothing. Usually savings start within 60 days. So my question is, would it be worth the look? I believe if you look at your bills and you are one of those companies spending 6 figures a year and you look at it in light of what we discussed, you would probably think like, yeah, there's a lot of questions we can't really answer about these bills. And I don't have time to spend hundreds of hours trying to figure out what's going on, dealing with the vendors and getting to the bottom of it. So that's why we're here. We're happy to help. That said, if you do have hundreds of hours to spend, totally makes sense. It's probably a good investment to start doing that. I have a book, Principles of Telecom Expense Management, which can go into the details. But we're also available to augment and enhance whatever you guys are already doing. And we found that say almost all of my clients, I think maybe one in particular where this wasn't the case, but they're always doing really good work, looking into and managing their costs and renegotiating their spend. But there's things we don't all know, so it's good to have a second set of eyes come in. And I would have had to do a lot more work if they hadn't been in there doing a good job, and we're able to come in and build up on top of the success they've already experienced and save them a lot of money in addition to what they've already saved on their own. So I think it's a good team effort, and we'd love to help you. And please feel free to reach out. Here's a quote from one of my favorite quotes from a client. I went into this project a bit skeptical that we would save enough money to make the effort worthwhile. I couldn't have been more wrong. We're saving close to 50% of our yearly voice and data charges. This project has made me a hero with our CFO. So I was one of my favorite early bigger clients, and American Nursing Services, Michael McConnell. So great guy. And so I guess now, I don't know if there are any questions which anyone has. You can also reach out via email to info@berlinpacific.com or connect and DM me on LinkedIn. And so I'm Anders Mikkelsen with Berlin Pacific. And let's see, I'm trying to see if there's any questions. Anybody has anything at the moment? Let's see. Okay. So I'm not seeing anything, but let me see. Well, if there are any questions, I apologize if I missed them. I don't think we have any today. And so I feel like I'm not as on top of how to view what's going on in the chat and everything today. But I didn't see anything specific. Oh, here we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate the compliment. But yeah, this is definitely available for, obviously this is available for anyone to to watch again, and you can definitely come and send me an email or send me a DM with your questions after this, and it's probably possible for people to comment on the event after it's finished, and I'll probably be able to answer any public comments as well. So that would be great. And yeah, thank you, Rick, for attending, and Bob and everyone else. And look forward to talking to everyone. And hopefully this is helpful and educational. And we look forward to working with you. And if there's anything we can do to support you, either in a big way or a small way, again, if you have time to dive into this stuff yourself, definitely a copy of my book, Principles of Telecom Expense Management. It's a training guide. It will explain to you in excruciating detail how to do everything. And then, okay, I got a good question. How often would you redo this type of analysis? Well, I think this type of analysis is sort of, if you're a normal bill reviewer, you have to look at your bills every month. So the idea with this type of analysis here is, what should you be keeping in mind when you look at your bills every month? And when you see things like, oh, I have no idea what these charges are for. I have no idea where they are, what location they're at. I don't see any usage data. I have no idea if any of these are still being used, et cetera, et cetera. These are kind of things you can keep in the back of your mind when you're doing your regular bill approval. In terms of the deep dive, what I recommend doing is, I really have to go into it, but I would recommend, if you're spending a lot of money, there are almost inevitably going to be a lot of unanswered questions every month. So therefore, you should do the deep dive, which means that you should have someone like us build an inventory of every single charge, and then you should validate your monthly bills against what the inventory predicts you should be paying every month, and you should have a document explaining what your bill should look like before you get it. And then you should be able to compare your bill to that document. And it's probably some cool things you could do with AI to kind of auto validate a document as it comes in. And we're also going to be talking next session about an AI tool working on to do like a variance report to show you all the changes between your two bills. And that's something you would want to identify every month. So, you have to look at your bills every month, and, doing the deep dives can be a one-time thing. But once you've done the one-time thing, you then want to have some sort of artifact or document documenting everything, so that you know that it's easy to approve a bill, and you can be like, yes, well, it's true that we don't have any usage data on this bill, but we actually have documented what all these things are for. And we know that as of, June 2026, that these things are still being used. And then you could go back and maybe verify every 3 months, like, okay, yeah, we have re-verified that even though there's no usage on this bill, we do know that these things are still needed for the business, and et cetera. So yeah, you can apply these same principles 100% to cloud costs and Microsoft license costs, any software as a service, and really any kind of vendor service for sure. So you would want to go in, and people have the exact same questions. It's like, people do not understand their cloud bills. They don't understand what all these licenses are for. They don't know which ones they're using, which ones they aren't. And so usually when they do have those types of questions, that means it's time to do a deep investigation and bring in somebody from the outside. And if you have a lot of time, then there's also a lot of tools you can use, like Rick Wise, who's on this call. He has a great tool you can use to look at cloud costs. But you can also work with experts like myself and my colleagues, where we will come in and we'll do all this work for you, and we'll figure it out for you, and we'll create that deep visibility and do the deep dive into any type of IT vendor spending, which is regular. So we have a whole deep bench of experts in all sorts of areas. So we'd love to help you. And so I think that's hope that answers that question. And I guess we'll give a few more minutes in case there's any other questions. But thank you for the great questions. Okay, I think we ran out of questions. Went a little longer than I expected, but hopefully this was helpful and you got some real value out of how we would approach this, and you can see just how expensive these problems are, and even just catching one little thing can add up to thousands of dollars a month. And yeah, thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so hopefully that'll help you serve you guys well in the future. And look forward to talking to anyone who we can help. And have a great day. Take care.